The smell of stale coffee and desperation had sunk so deep into Eulalia's skin, she could no longer tell where the double shift ended and her life began. As she poured another refill, her mind wasn't on the stranger who had just walked in wearing a coat too heavy for October, but on her son Noah's persistent cough and an impatient landlord's voicemail. She believed her only battle tonight was staying awake until closing time. She didn't know that the man watching her with ancient eyes wasn't looking for service, but salvation, or that before the sun came up, her hands, used to counting loose change, would be dragging a vampire king out of the flames that threatened to turn his immortality into ash. The diner's neon sign flickered against the October dusk, casting pink shadows across the cracked parking lot. Eulalia Vance balanced 3 plates along her left arm, her right hand already reaching for the coffee pot behind the counter. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed between her shoulder blades, the kind that came from double shifts and worry that never slept. She refilled cup after cup, her smile automatic, her mind elsewhere, on the electric bill, on Noah's cough that hadn't gone away, on the landlord's voicemail she'd been avoiding for 3 days. The bell above the door chimed. Eulalia glanced up, her practiced greeting already forming, but the words dissolved on her tongue. The man who entered didn't walk so much as materialize from the threshold's shadow, tall, wrapped in a coat too heavy for the mild evening. He moved with a stillness that made the fluorescent lights seem to buzz louder. His face was angular, beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten, like looking at something through museum glass, untouchable and strange. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark, impossibly dark, and fixed on her with an intensity that felt like recognition. Coffee. The word came out steadier than she felt. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head, studying her the way someone might examine a painting they'd thought lost. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an accent she couldn't place. Something old, something that didn't belong in a roadside diner in Virginia. "You have a kind face," he said softly. "That will be your salvation, or your ruin." Before Eulalia could respond, before she could process the strange poetry of the statement, the world outside erupted in light. The explosion shattered the front window. Glass became 1,000 glittering daggers. Eulalia threw her arms over her face, felt the sting of tiny cuts across her forearms. Oh! The coffee pot slipped from her grip, ceramic, shattering against linoleum. Screams erupted from the booths behind her, but the sound that cut through everything else was the roar of fire. Not normal fire. This burned white gold, brilliant as a star torn from the sky and thrust into the parking lot. The heat slammed through the broken window like a physical force, stealing the moisture from her eyes, making her skin tighten. The strange man staggered backward, and for the first time emotion cracked his marble composure. Diwa, raw, and ancient. "No," he whispered. "Not here, not with another." Explosion. The diner's exterior wall buckled. Pink flames of Avata, Doceria, wall buckled. Flames crawled across the doorframe, that impossible white gold that seemed to burn with its own consciousness, seeking, hungry. Through the inferno, Eulalia saw a figure. A woman stood in the center of the parking lot, her hand raised, fingers spread as though conducting an orchestra. She was beautiful, devastatingly so, with hair like spilled ink, and a smile that belonged on something carved into cathedral stones as a warning. The flames danced around her, caressing her skin without burning, illuminating her face with divine light. "Lysander," the woman called, her voice carrying over the roar with crystalline clarity. "Did you think you could hide among the cattle? Did you think I wouldn't find you?" The man Lysander pressed himself against the counter, and Eulalia saw something that made her heart stutter. His skin, where the light touched it, was beginning to smoke. Not burn, smoke, like morning mist evaporating under the sun. "Everyone out," Eulalia's voice cracked through her shock. Back door, now. The other waitress, Maggie, was already herding the handful of customers toward the kitchen. Old Mr. Chen from booth 3, the truckers who always ordered pie, the teenage couple who'd been sharing a milkshake. They scrambled over each other, their panic a living thing. But Lysander didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the approaching flames with the resignation of someone who'd been running for too long. The woman in the parking lot laughed, and the fire surged forward, crashing through the broken window like a tidal wave of light. Eulalia's body moved before her mind caught up. He stood frozen, staring at the approaching flames with the resignation of someone who'd been running for too long. She grabbed a tablecloth from the nearest booth, dunked it in the sink behind the counter, the water still running, still cold, still real, in a world that had suddenly become impossible. The wet fabric steamed in her hands as she turned back toward Lysander. "Are you insane?" he hissed, his dark eyes wide. "Run! You don't understand what—" "Shut up and move." She threw the cloth over his head and shoulders, grabbed his arm. Ice. His skin was ice, through the expensive fabric of his coat, not cold. Ice, like touching the surface of a frozen lake in January. So cold it burned, so cold it felt like her palm might stick to him. But she didn't let go. "The back," she gasped, pulling him toward the kitchen. "There's a door." The fire cut them off. It poured through the broken window, spreading across the floor in defiance of physics, of logic, of everything Eulalia understood about the world. The white gold flames formed a wall between them and escape, and the heat was so intense, she felt her eyebrows singe. Lysander's arm tensed under her grip. She sealed the exits. "She wants to watch me burn." "Who is she?" Eulalia's voice came out as a rasp. "Someone I wronged 500 years ago." The words should have been absurd, should have been the ravings of a madman. But Eulalia looked at his face, at the way the firelight revealed skin too perfect, too smooth, like porcelain that had never known a blemish, and something in her chest understood. The fire was circling now, tightening, a noose of impossible light. The woman's laughter echoed from outside, delighted and cruel. Eulalia's mind raced. The kitchen was blocked. The front door was an inferno. The windows, there the small window above the dish station, barely large enough for a person, but it faced the side alley, away from the parking lot, away from the woman. "Can you fit through there?" she pointed. Lysander followed her gaze and shook his head slowly. "The light, even indirect, it will." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "You should save yourself. The fire won't hurt you. It's meant for me." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." She was already moving, dragging him with her. Her hand still burned where it touched his frozen skin, but she tightened her grip. The fire reached for them as they stumbled toward the dish station. Eulalia felt it lick at her ankles, but Lysander was right. It didn't burn her. It passed over her skin like warm breath, searching for something else, searching for him. She shoved him toward the window. "Go, now." "I can't." "Go." Lysander looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his ancient eyes. Wonder, confusion, fear of a different kind. He reached for the window, and the moment his hand touched the frame, the fire surged. It wrapped around his legs, his waist, crawling up his body with terrible purpose. Eulalia heard him gasp, not a scream, but a sound of profound weariness, as though this was an end he'd been expecting for centuries. She didn't think. She threw herself against him, using her body to shield him from the flames, pushing him through the window with strength she didn't know she possessed. The wet tablecloth steamed and smoked. His coat caught fire, and she beat at it with her bare hands, feeling nothing, feeling everything. They tumbled through together, landing in a heap in the alley's darkness. The fire didn't follow. Eulalia lay on top of him, gasping, her heart hammering. so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Beneath her, Lysander was perfectly still, not breathing, not moving, just still. Slowly, she pushed herself up, looking down at him. His coat was scorched, his shirt torn, but the skin beneath, pale as moonlight, was unmarked. No burns, no blisters, nothing. As she watched, a cut on his cheek from the broken glass sealed itself, the skin knitting together like water flowing backward. Lysander opened his eyes. In the alley's shadows, they reflected the distant firelight like a cat's. "You should have let me burn," he whispered. Behind them, the diner collapsed in a shower of sparks and that impossible white gold light. And somewhere in the darkness, Eulalia heard the woman laugh. The laughter echoed off the brick walls, bouncing between buildings like something alive, something that fed on their fear. Eulalia's hands were still pressed against Lysander's chest, feeling the absolute absence beneath his shirt. No heartbeat, no rise and fall of breath, just the cold solidity of marble wrapped in silk. He sat up slowly, moving her aside with a gentleness that contradicted the inhuman grace of the motion. Every movement was too fluid, too precise, like watching water flow uphill. The scorched fabric of his coat crumbled away as he stood, revealing the pristine white shirt beneath, already mending itself where the flames had touched. "We need to move." His voice was steady, but Eulalia caught the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept darting to the roofline above them. "She knows where you are now. She's marked you." Marked. Eulalia's voice cracked. Her palms were raw, blistered from beating out the flames on his coat, and the pain was starting to register now that the adrenaline was fading. She looked down at her hands, at the angry red welts rising across her skin, and felt the world tilt sideways. Lysander caught her before she could fall, his hands impossibly cool against her fevered skin. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with temperature. He held her upright, studying her face with those strange reflective eyes, and for a moment she saw something flicker there, concern perhaps, or something older and more complicated. "You're hurt," he said it like an accusation, like she'd done something wrong by saving him. "You are on fire." The words came out sharper than she intended. Behind them, the diner groaned and collapsed further, sending up a fountain of sparks that illuminated the alley in stuttering orange light. She could see her reflection in a puddle at her feet, soot-streaked face, wild eyes, hair singed at the ends. She looked like someone who'd survived the end of the world. Maybe she had. Lysander's fingers were already moving over her hands, so gentle she barely felt the pressure. Where he touched, the pain receded, replaced by a tingling coolness that spread up her arms. She watched, mesmerized, as the blisters began to fade, the angry red fading to pink, then to the pale cream of healthy skin. "What are you?" The question whispered out of her, carried on breath that fogged in the suddenly cold air. He released her hands. Stepping back so quickly, he seemed to simply appear 3 feet away. The distance felt deliberate, calculated, something that should have let you run the first night I walked into that diner. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. The fire department probably, or police. Normal people responding to normal disasters, unaware that the flames consuming the Starlight Diner had been anything but ordinary. "I need to get Noah." Eulalia's mind snapped back into focus with the thought of the boy, Hall, alone in the apartment above the diner. Except the apartment was gone now, wasn't it? Consumed by that terrible white gold fire. Her knees went weak again. Oh God, Noah. The child wasn't in the building. Lysander's voice cut through her panic like a blade. "I had Silas move him an hour ago. He's safe." The relief was so intense it hurt. Eulalia pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart slam against her ribs. "You? How did you know?" "Because Saraphina always starts with fire." He turned toward the mouth of the alley, where the streetlights cast long shadows that seem to writhe and twist with their own intelligence. She likes to watch things burn. It's her signature, her calling card. When I felt her presence in the diner tonight, I knew what was coming. Saraphina. The name settled into Eulalia's memory, like a stone dropping into dark water. The woman with the crimson dress and the smile that promised beautiful destruction. Who is she? Lysander didn't answer immediately. He was watching the shadows, his body coiled with a tension that made him look predatory despite his stillness. Finally, he said, "Someone I should have killed 800 years ago. 800 years. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and undeniable. Eulalia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. The alley seemed to contract around her, the walls pressing in, the sky above reduced to a narrow strip of smoke-stained darkness. Come. Lysander extended his hand, palm up, an invitation and a command. I'll take you to the boy. Then I'll explain everything. You've earned that much. She looked at his hand, pale, elegant, unburned, and thought about the cut she'd watched seal itself. Thought about the absence of breath, the missing heartbeat, the way he moved like liquid shadow. Thought about the fire that should have killed him, and the woman who'd laughed as the world burned. Eulalia placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, cool and steady, and the world lurched. They were moving, but not walking. The alley blurred around them, buildings streaming past in ribbons of brick and glass. Wind roared in her ears, cold enough to steal her breath, and she felt her feet leave the ground. She should have screamed, should have fought. Instead, she held tighter, pressing herself against Lysander's chest, as the city became a watercolor painting running in the rain. When they stopped, she was gasping, her legs trembling. They stood in front of an old brownstone, on a street she didn't recognize, trees lining the sidewalk with branches that clawed at the night sky. Every window in the building was dark, except one on the third floor, where warm yellow light spilled out onto the fire escape. Where she couldn't finish the question, her stomach was still catching up with the rest of her. Somewhere she won't think to look. Not yet. Lysander released her hand, and she immediately missed the steadying coolness of his touch. He moved to the building's entrance, producing a key from somewhere in his ruined coat. Talus has been preparing this place for weeks. I'd hoped we wouldn't need it so soon. Talachi. Eulalia followed him into a narrow hallway that smelled of old wood and lemon polish. A staircase curved upward into shadow. You've been planning this. I've been planning for the moment she found me. He started up the stairs, not looking back, trusting her to follow. I've been running for 3 centuries, Eulalia, staying one step ahead, never lingering anywhere long enough to be caught. But then I walked into your diner, and I made a mistake. What mistake? I stayed. The word echoed in the stairwell, heavy with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. They climbed in silence, their footsteps creating a rhythm, hers solid and human, his barely there, like a ghost, ascending toward the light. The third-floor apartment door was already open. Inside, Eulalia could hear the low murmur of a television and smell something cooking. Chicken soup, maybe, rich with herbs, normal smells, safe smells. She stepped through the doorway and found Noah curled up on a leather sofa, wrapped in a blanket that was too big for him, his eyes glued to a cartoon playing on an old television set. Eulalia. He scrambled off the couch, the blanket tangling around his feet, nearly tripping him in his rush to reach her. She caught him, lifting him up, despite the protest of her exhausted muscles, and buried her face in his hair. He smelled like the lavender soap she used for his baths, like safety and innocence, and everything she was trying desperately to protect. Hey, little man. Her voice broke on the words. You okay? Silas said, or we were having an adventure. Noah pulled back to look at her face, his small hands framing her cheeks. His eyes, so dark, so serious, studied her with an intensity that made him seem older than 6. He said you'd come soon. He made soup. Over Noah's shoulder, Eulalia saw Silas emerge from what must have been the kitchen. He was exactly as she remembered from the diner, weathered face, kind eyes, the bearing of someone who'd seen too much and chosen kindness anyway. He carried a steaming mug, which he set down on the coffee table. "Miss Vance," he nodded to her, then to Lysander. "My lord, I've prepared the guest room. The boys had dinner and a bath. I thought it best to maintain routine." "Thank you, Silas." Lysander moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to peer out at the street below. The light from outside caught his profile, turning him into a study of angles and shadows. "Any signs?" "None yet. But she'll find us eventually. She always does." Noah squirmed in Eulalia's arms, and she set him down gently. He immediately grabbed her hand, his small fingers wrapping around two of hers. "Are we staying here now? Is this our new home?" The question pierced her. She looked at the apartment, the worn but comfortable furniture, the bookshelves lining one wall, the kitchen visible through an archway, where more light spilled out in a warm pool. It was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived, nicer than she could ever afford. And it was a cage, wasn't it? A beautiful cage to keep them safe from something she still didn't understand. For a little while, she managed, just until things settled down. The diner burned down. Noah said it matter-of-factly, without emotion, and Eulalia's heart clenched. "Silas told me. He said sometimes old things have to burn, so new things can grow." She looked at Silas, who met her gaze steadily. There was something in his expression, sympathy, understanding, and beneath it all, a deep weariness that matched the feeling in her own bones. "That's right," Silas said softly. "Sometimes that's exactly what happens." Lysander turned from the window. "Silas, take the boy to bed. Miss Vance and I need to talk." It wasn't a request. Noah looked up at Eulalia, seeking permission, and she nodded, even though every instinct screamed at her to hold him close, to never let him out of her sight. But Silas was already moving forward, offering his hand to Noah with a gentle smile. "Come on, lad. I've got some books in the room. Do you like stories about dragons? Real dragons?" Noah's eyes lit up. "The realest kind. The ones that live in here." Silas tapped his temple, and Noah giggled, the sound so pure and innocent that Eulalia felt tears prick her eyes. She watched them disappear down a hallway, heard the soft click of a door closing, and then she was alone with Lysander in the warm lamplight. The silence stretched between them, thick with unasked questions and impossible truths. "Sit." Lysander gestured to the sofa. "Please." "You're pale." Lysander gestured to the sofa. "Please." She sat, more because her legs were giving out than because he'd asked. The leather was soft, worn in places, conforming to her body like it had been waiting for her. Lysander remained standing, his back to the window, his face half in shadow. 800 years ago, he began, his voice low and measured. "I was human. I had a name I've almost forgotten, a family I barely remember, and a life that mattered only to me. Then, Saraphina found me." Eulalia's hands clenched in her lap. She forced herself to stay quiet, to listen. She was beautiful, they always are, the old ones. Beautiful, and terrible, and utterly without mercy. She turned me, because she was bored, because I amused her for a moment, because she could. The transformation took 3 days. 3 days of dying while still alive, of feeling every cell in my body rewrite itself into something else, something wrong. He moved then, crossing to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught the light. He poured something dark red into a glass, and Eulalia's stomach turned when she realized what it must be. "I don't drink from humans anymore," he said, as if reading her mind. "Haven't for 200 years. This is synthetic, a poor substitute, but it keeps the hunger manageable." He took a sip, grimaced. "Saraphina taught me to hunt, to kill, to take pleasure in the fear of my prey. For 50 years, I was her perfect monster, her king of shadows. We built an empire of blood and terror across Europe, and I reveled in it. The words fell like stones into still water, each one creating ripples that spread outward. Eulalia felt sick, but she couldn't look away from him, from the pain etched into every line of his face. What changed? Her voice was barely a whisper. I met a child. Lysander set down the glass, his hand trembling slightly. A girl, maybe 7 years old, hiding in a cellar while I slaughtered her family upstairs. She looked at me with these huge eyes, and she didn't scream. She just asked me why. Why was I doing this? What had her mother done to deserve to die? He turned to face Eulalia fully, and she saw the anguish in his expression, raw and bleeding, despite the centuries between then and now. I couldn't answer her. For the first time in 50 years, I saw myself clearly, saw what I'd become, what Saraphina had made me. I let the child go, and when Saraphina found out, she tried to kill me for my disobedience. We fought, and I barely escaped. I've been running ever since. 300 years, Eulalia breathed. You've been running for 300 years. She doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. And she never ever stops. Lysander moved closer, kneeling in front of the sofa so they were eye level. This close, she could see the flecks of gold in his irises, the impossible depth of his gaze. I've tried to live quietly, to atone for what I was. I've saved lives where I could, protected the innocent, fought others of my kind who prey on humans. But she always finds me eventually. And when she does, everyone around me dies. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Then why did you come to the diner? Eulalia's voice rose, anger cutting through her fear. Why did you put us in danger? Why didn't you just stay away? Because I'm selfish. The admission came out raw, honest. Because for 3 centuries, I've been alone. Completely, utterly alone. And then I walked into your diner and saw you, saw the way you cared for that boy, the way you smiled, even though you were exhausted, the way you treated every customer like they mattered. You were so alive, Eulalia, so beautifully, impossibly alive. And I wanted to be near that, just for a little while. I thought I could keep my distance, thought I could protect you just by watching. I was wrong. His hand moved, hovering near hers, but not quite touching, like he was afraid of contaminating her with his presence. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I should have stayed away, should have let you live your life without ever knowing monsters were real. But I was weak, and now you're caught in this, and I don't know how to get you out. Eulalia looked at him, really looked at him, saw past the supernatural grace and the inhuman beauty to the man beneath. The man who'd spent 300 years trying to atone for 50 years of darkness. The man who'd saved Noah without being asked. Who'd left generous tips not for show, but because he understood what it meant to struggle. The man who'd been willing to burn rather than let that fire touch her. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool, but not unpleasantly so, like marble that had been sitting in the shade on a summer day. His fingers twitched in surprise, but he didn't pull away. You're not a monster, she said quietly. Monsters don't spend 3 centuries running from their past. Monsters don't apologize. Monsters don't look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Eulalia. No. She squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in it, the careful control he maintained even now. I'm terrified. I'm so scared I can barely think straight. But not of you, of her, of what she'll do to Noah, to Silas, to everyone I care about. But not of you. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or something too fragile to name. You should be afraid of me. I've killed more people than you could count. I've done things that would haunt your nightmares. We've all done things we regret. I thought of her own past, of the choices that had led her to that diner, to Noah, to this moment. The question isn't who you were. It's who you choose to be now. Before he could respond, the lamp flickered. It was subtle, just a brief dimming, but Lysander's head snapped toward the window. His entire body went rigid, every muscle coiling with sudden tension. Outside, the streetlights began to go out one by one, darkness rolling down the street like a wave. She's here. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Eulalia heard the fear beneath it. She found us faster than I thought possible. He was on his feet in an instant, pulling Eulalia up with him. Get Noah, get him now. We're leaving. But even as he spoke, shadows began to seep under the door. Not normal shadows. These moved with purpose, crawling across the floor like living ink. They pooled in the center of the room, rising up, taking shape. Saraphina stepped out of the darkness, like she'd been there all along, her crimson dress pristine, her smile sharp enough to cut. Hello, my darling king. Did you really think you could hide from me in this pathetic little hovel? Lysander moved faster than Eulalia's eyes could track, placing himself between her and Saraphina. Leave them alone. This is between us. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. Saraphina's gaze slid past him, landing on Eulalia with predatory interest. She's part of this now. The moment you cared about her, she became mine to break. The shadows surged forward, and somewhere down the hall, Noah began to scream. Noah's screams sliced through the air like broken glass. Eulalia's body moved before her mind could catch up, instinct propelling her toward the hallway. But Lysander's hand clamped around her wrist, cold as iron, holding her in place. It's a trap, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She wants you to run to him. Seraphina's laugh was silk sliding over razors. Smart boy. Though it won't save you. She tilted her head, and the shadows writhed along the walls like serpents. I've already tasted his fear. Such sweet, innocent terror. Reminds me of you, Lysander, when you were still human, still breakable. The temperature in the room plummeted. Eulalia's breath came out in white clouds, and frost began to crawl across the windows in delicate, deadly patterns. She could feel Lysander trembling beside her, not from fear, but from the effort of restraining something vast and violent. You want me? His words came out rough, jagged. Fine. Let them go. Take me instead. Oh, my darling. Seraphina moved closer, gliding across the floor without seeming to walk. I don't want you. I want you to suffer. And the best way to make an immortal suffer is to take away the one thing that makes eternity bearable. She looked directly at Eulalia, and those ancient eyes held centuries of malice. Hope. The shadows lunged. Lysander shoved Eulalia backward and met the attack head-on, his form blurring as he moved with inhuman speed. The sound of impact was like thunder in the small apartment, furniture splintering, walls cracking. Eulalia hit the floor hard, her shoulder screaming in protest, but she scrambled to her feet immediately. Noah. She had to get to Noah. She ran down the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. His door was open, darkness spilling out, like smoke. She plunged through it anyway, her hands outstretched, searching. Noah, where are you? A small sob answered her. She followed the sound to the closet, yanking the door open to find him huddled in the corner, his face wet with tears, his small body shaking. Relief flooded through her, so intensely, it made her dizzy. I've got you, she whispered, pulling him into her arms. He buried his face against her shoulder, his fingers clutching her shirt. I've got you. Behind them, the apartment shook with violence. Glass shattered. Something heavy crashed to the floor. Through it all, she heard Lysander's voice, raw with fury, and Seraphina's laughter, cold and cruel. Eulalia carried Noah back toward the living room, but stopped at the threshold. The scene before her was carnage. The couch was overturned, the coffee table reduced to splinters. Lysander, and Saraphina moved in a deadly dance, too fast for human eyes to fully track. But Eulalia could see enough, could see the dark blood staining Lysander's shirt, could see the way he favored his left side. He was losing. "You need to leave," she said, her voice steady, despite the terror clawing at her throat. Now. But Saraphina heard her. In a movement too quick to follow, she disengaged from Lysander and appeared directly in front of Eulalia, so close that Eulalia could see the flecks of gold in those crimson eyes, could smell something ancient and wrong, like roses left too long in a tomb, leaving so soon. Saraphina's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around Eulalia's throat. The touch burned like ice. "But we've only just begun," Noah screamed. Lysander roared, a sound that was barely human, filled with rage and desperation. But Saraphina's grip tightened, and Eulalia felt her airway closing, felt her vision starting to blur at the edges. "Look at him," Saraphina hissed in her ear. "Look at what you've reduced him to, a king, crawling for a mortal. Pathetic." Through the haze of oxygen deprivation, Eulalia saw Lysander on his knees, his face twisted with anguish, saw him reaching out, his hand trembling, and in that moment, she understood. This was the choice. This was the test. She couldn't breathe, but she could speak, just barely, just enough. "Do it," she gasped. "The ritual. Become human." Lysander's eyes widened. "No, Eulalia, no. It's the only way." Her words came out strangled, but clear. "She can't hurt me if you're mortal. The bond will break. Do it, now." "She'll die anyway," Saraphina said, amused. "I'll kill her just to watch you grieve." "No." Lysander's voice changed, became something else, something final. "You won't." He closed his eyes, and Eulalia felt it, a shift in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Lysander began to speak in a language she didn't recognize, words that seemed to pull at the fabric of reality itself. The shadows recoiled. Saraphina's grip loosened, just slightly, confusion flickering across her perfect face. "What are you doing?" Her voice lost its mocking edge. "Stop, Lysander, stop." But he didn't stop. The words came faster, more urgent, and with each syllable, the room grew warmer. The frost on the windows began to melt. Eulalia felt Saraphina's hand start to tremble against her throat. "You fool," Saraphina breathed. "You're giving up everything, your power, your immortality, your throne, for her." Lysander opened his eyes, and they were no longer the black of an abyss. They were brown, human brown, warm and alive and mortal. "Yes," he said simply. The bond shattered. Eulalia felt it break like a physical thing, a cord severing, a connection dissolving. Saraphina's hand fell away from her throat, and the ancient vampire staggered backward, her face contorted with shock and fury. "No," she snarled. "No, you can't." But the transformation was already complete. Lysander stood, and his movements were slower now, heavier, human. The shadows that had clung to him like a second skin were gone. The unnatural stillness that had always marked him as other had vanished. He was just a man, and Saraphina, bound by ancient laws even she couldn't break, had lost her leverage. Without the bond, without his power to corrupt and twist, Eulalia was just a human, beneath her notice, beneath her revenge. "This isn't over," Saraphina said, her voice shaking with rage. "You've made yourself vulnerable, Lysander, mortal, weak, and when I come for you again, and I will come, you won't have centuries to run, you'll have decades, maybe less. Then I'll spend them well," Lysander said quietly. Saraphina's form began to dissolve, the shadows pulling her back into whatever darkness had birthed her. But her eyes stayed locked on Lysander until the very end, burning with promise and threat. Then she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Eulalia sank to the floor. Noah still clutched in her arms, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and terror. Her throat ached where Saraphina had gripped it, and she could feel the bruises already forming. Lysander crossed the room slowly, so slowly compared to before, and knelt beside her. His hand, when he reached out to touch her face, was warm, actually warm. She could feel the blood moving beneath his skin, could hear his heart beating in his chest. "You're insane," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You gave up everything." "No." He smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost unbearably human. "I finally found it." Noah stirred between them, lifting his tear-stained face. "Is the scary lady gone?" "She's gone," Eulalia said, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "She's gone, and she's not coming back." It wasn't entirely true. Saraphina's parting words still echoed in Eulalia's mind, but it was true enough for now, true enough for this moment. Lysander helped her to her feet, his movements careful, almost tentative, as if he was still learning the limits of his new body. They stood together in the wreckage of the apartment, holding each other up, Noah between them like an anchor. Outside, the streetlights flickered back to life, one by one. Dawn was still hours away, but the darkness had lost its teeth. The shadows were just shadows again. "What happens now?" Eulalia asked. Lysander looked at her, and in his eyes she saw wonder and fear and hope all tangled together. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never been mortal before. Not that I can remember." "Then we'll figure it out together," she said. He pulled her close, his arms solid and real around her, and she felt his breath against her hair, warm and alive and impossibly precious. Noah wrapped his small arms around both their legs, completing the circle. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone had probably called about the noise. There would be questions, explanations, complications, but for now, in this moment, they were safe. They were together, and for the first time in 540 years, Lysander Thorne was truly, beautifully, terrifyingly human.